let's start. Is confidence a dirty word? So I think the answer from me is absolutely, positively, maybe. And why do I say that? Because lack of confidence can really turn into fear and frustration. Things that we don't really strive to achieve, but we understand that we all want to be confident. But what's the opposite? Too much confidence, which really leads to arrogance in a lot of ways. And that's not something we want to strive for either. So I think today we're going to talk about confidence in a way that is something we build with time and experience. And I've asked our panelists today to give their personal experiences and advice. So I'm going to start by briefly introducing everyone. I'm going to start, all right, Christine is not here. All right, with us today we have Ginny Hill, the CEO for Girl Scouts of Central and Southern New Jersey, who, I'm not going to read the whole bio, you guys can look it up, the QR codes are around the room. They're going to talk about their experiences as they answer questions, but let me just give you a few highlights so you know who you're hearing from today and the quality of people here. Ginny Hill is a dynamic executive leader whose career has focused on empowerment and advancement of women and girls throughout the tri-state area. She has served as the CEO of the Girl Scouts of Central and Southern New Jersey since 2013, so decade. That supports 18,000 girls and adult volunteers across 9 counties in New Jersey. And Ginny feels a responsibility to help shape the next generation of young women. So that will be Ginny. And also joining us is Casey Moes. She is the Director of Business Development in North America for CWT. Casey has 20 years of experience leading diverse teams in identifying and mitigating risk to people, facilities, and information through her service in the U.S. Army. Casey has served in various law enforcement positions. She's served in Italy, Korea, throughout Africa, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And when she was in Italy, she served as the director of a team that planned, assessed, and managed risk in areas of counterterrorism, emergency management, personnel recovery, travel risk management, and safety in the continent of Africa. So I think you can tell from her bio, she's probably had a lot of situations that have helped her build her confidence throughout her career. And by the way, I'm Trish Zita. I am the founder and owner of a lobbying firm, one of the top 5 firms in the state of New Jersey. I have my wonderful team here with me, 5 of the ladies that work with me. We are the only female wholly owned top 5 firm in the state. And I'm also a serial entrepreneur and a small business owner in other areas as well. So I thought we would start today by asking Casey and Ginny the most important question here. What does confidence mean to you? Define it in the way that you define confidence, and to give us some perspective, here's the definition, the actual definition of confidence. Confidence is a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities and qualities. So that's the textbook, that's the Webster's definition. But confidence really can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, and it's something that I think comes with time and experience. So I'm going to ask Ginny first. Give us your definition. How do you define confidence?
Yeah, so to me, confidence is both external and internal. I think there is confident behavior, how we demonstrate self-assuredness and confidence in our skills, and then how it feels on the inside, right? And I think you're absolutely right. It comes with experience and time, but I also have the pure joy of seeing incredibly confident 7-year-olds who sell 3,000 boxes of cookies a year because they think they can and they do it. And so I do think that it is a skill. There is some innate ability when we talk about like managing our own thoughts and how the thoughts connect to the actions that really can start to manifest at a really young age.
And I'm going to, as a follow-up, I'm going to ask you both what you think is not confidence. Like the attributes of folks who sometimes believe they're acting confident but are not. So Casey, sorry, let's go back to you. How do you define confidence?
So I think confidence is having the mind to speak up or act, and it has to be the right time, right place, and the right subject matter. Some of the rules I follow are simple rules. I don't want to embarrass anyone in public. Can I use this information offline to empower someone? Or do I have to say it right now because it's an emergency? And as what you heard, sometimes it was an emergency and I had to speak up at that time. So it was important. I am going to tell a story really briefly. When I was on that staff in Italy, I was a senior officer, I was a lieutenant colonel, but I was surrounded by other colonels. They were all men. I was on the operations side, and there was more of the staff side on the other end of the video conference. And we met like this 2 times a week. Anyways, we were discussing some operation and had just heard.
I got me in there.
There we go. That's great. I could always project if I need to, right? So we were listening to our other staff members. So a very senior female doctor on our staff stated her opinion. So did the lawyer. And when the conversation ended, and it's muted on our end, I heard some of the men in the room, they were sort of disparaging those remarks. Now, maybe it's because it was the doctor and lawyer's opinion and it was something they didn't want to hear, was inconvenient about the operation. But as I was sitting in the room, I was thinking, wow, this is a lawyer and a doctor. And they're giving their opinion, and they're on the staff. They're their full colleagues. I was junior to most of the men in the room, but they're not. They were their colleagues, their peers. And I'm thinking, this still happens. And as I was making a note to myself, I thought, should I be speaking up right now? Looks pretty scary to speak up right now. And, I didn't. I made a mental note, and I was like, I think I'm going to approach this guy and tell them how I feel about it later. And I did. But if I could do that over, I think that I would speak up now. And I'm sharing this because I think sometimes when you share a mistake, it's easier to learn, right? So if I could have interjected with maybe a bit of humor, so I didn't violate rule number 1 about embarrassing anyone in public, say something like, gee, I wish the Army hadn't spent so much money sending these guys to law school and medical school. If you guys know the answers already, I mean, that would have been funny. It would have also called them out, right? There's a way sometimes to assert yourself and say something which is right. So not necessarily my job to assert everyone's rights, but definitely if I'm in the room to speak up for what I think is right. And I'm going to tell you a good story on the other end where I got great support from my male colleagues. This was before my time in Italy on that staff. I was a fellow at the Department of State. So one military person, diplomatic security, all of these Department of State people, they know their processes. They're all very smart. I signed up for the Syria portfolio because nobody else wanted it. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves in a situation where we wanted to find a way to get entry into Syria. So they're like, Casey, been working on this. Time to go brief everyone. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I'm ready to do that. But one of my male colleagues came over to me. He's like, Casey, you've been studying this every day. He's like, you know this better than anyone else. Just go up there and tell me what you know. And I did. And it was amazing. It worked out just the way it was supposed to. Right place, right time, right subject matter.
Right. And I think to go to what you were asking about, Trish, I had a mentor, a woman mentor at one point in time, leader that I looked up to, who her mantra was, fake it till you make it. But to me, that was a little problematic because I always thought somebody may figure you out if you're faking it, right? And I think it was her way of saying appear confident, appear competent, because that will get the doors open and that will make things happen. that's the external side. But then how you manage that when you go home at night, right? I had shared with these two ladies that I'm going through something right now, which is, in addition to my day job, I just became an adjunct professor at Rowan, which I'm very excited about. I know my subject matter. Thank you. I know my subject matter. It's leadership, right? I feel like to some extent I could probably teach that without the academic textbook that I was provided. But there were new things I had to learn. 4 technologies to be a college professor. New respect for anybody in here who's in academia. 4. I was given a plethora of tools, but they were created by somebody else in the order that that person would teach this course, and I'm having to do the jockeying. And so very quickly, the voice in my head said, maybe this is too much for you. Maybe you can't do it. Maybe you don't have enough time, right? We all have that little voice in our head, right? So how do I tell that little voice, no, it's going to be fine, right? And then the sort of icing on the cake was last night. I opened up for class tonight because I teach tonight, and I said to my husband, "Oh yeah, here we go. Now I feel good because I have no idea what the previous professor did with this slide deck because there's misspellings and there's sentences missing. So this is clearly not the finished product, or the teacher didn't really actually use it. So I got it as a tool, but I was sort of had a very narrow view of what success looked like, and that suddenly I felt like super more confident. Like, okay, I'm gonna teach this class tonight, and it's all gonna be good. So I think we all have those moments, right? And then as women, we have to be really thoughtful about how do we portray sometimes when we have that voice in our head, right? And that lack of confidence. I try to be very mindful as the CEO to give my staff, which is largely women, the opportunity to apologize when it's necessary. But then I also say to them, please don't say you're sorry right now, because they always want to tell me they're sorry because I'm the CEO. And that's like, oh my gosh, we let you down. We're sorry. And I know what they can control and I know what they can't control. And that repetitive use of the I'm sorry, that portrays a lack of self-confidence. Don't be sorry, solve the dilemma. And when you need to apologize, but know the difference between the two. And I do get to see girls as they grow through the Girl Scout program have opportunities. And there are things like I think some analogous to what you were talking about, Casey, is the importance of taking risk, right? And then you learn, oh, I can do something that I thought was hard. I know now, reflecting back on my life, that was quite literally Girl Scout camp in the 4th grade, where I had to get in a canoe in a lake where I couldn't see my feet. And to me, that was the most terrifying thing I could possibly imagine. But I did it. And then afterwards I was like, oh, I can do weird, strange, gross things and survive, right? I can survive. And it, we all have those moments. Then we just have to tap back to them and say, yep, I can survive. And that's how we build self-confidence over time, like you were saying.
I'm actually going to add a little story of my own, because you tapped on a couple of things, the fake it till you make it, which I think, on some level is helpful externally, right? But then when you actually have to perform and have some competence in what you're doing, sometimes faking it doesn't work out. So I think we've talked about when we had our calls previously about really being prepared. And how do we do that? And one of the stories I tell is years ago when I first became a lobbyist, and it was for a state trade association, and I represented pharmaceutical, petrochemical, and chemical companies. And it was not an easy industry to be in. This is in the 90s. And I would walk into my boardroom as the state director of government affairs, and there would be about 30 to 40 CEOs, all men. And I would be the only woman in the room. And I would get up and give my presentation. And most of the time, they were very negative in the response of the information I was providing. And it took me a little while to realize they're not really angry at me. They're angry at what the government, because I'm giving government updates, is doing to them regulatorily. And I started to separate the idea that it wasn't my performance, it wasn't what I was doing, it was the information. I also had a mentor on that board, and it was a man who said to me, he's like, just keep doing what you're doing and make sure as you give them the information, you give them all the information, the good, the bad, the ugly. Don't keep the ugly out. And the more I did that, the more credible I became, and the more they trusted me. And that helped me build confidence enough to start giving them suggestions and ideas how to do things differently. It actually not only built my confidence, but it effectuated change within the organization in the way they thought. But it was not easy. And so, one of the other things that I'd like to, bring up in confidence is risk-taking. I think people have to have their own personal tolerance of what risk you're willing to take and not take. And when you're comfortable with that, that is when you feel confident. One bit of advice someone gave me years ago, a mentor, and I use it to this day, is when you're making a decision on something, what's the worst thing that could happen? Really, in your head, or write it down. What is the worst outcome? And if you can live with those outcomes, or you're not afraid of those outcomes, take the risk. Do whatever it is. Take that new job, change careers, start a new business. But if you're uncomfortable with that risk, don't do it. Again, confidence comes with time, but having these little tools, again, for me, it's that advice of ask yourself, what is the worst thing that could happen, and can I live with it?
Yeah. I remember when, I'm most of my career has been in nonprofit, but I didn't start out in nonprofit. I was in the private sector. And I made the transition into the nonprofit sector truly by accident, and then found myself about a year later, the CEO of the organization I worked for at the time was retiring. And she said to me, oh, you are the absolute best next leader for this organization, and here's why. And I thought she was crazy, because I thought in my head, it was a lack of self-confidence. I don't have the confidence to lead this organization. I don't know what a CEO does. I had a perception of what I thought a CEO did. And I ultimately used a lesson I learned from a mentor back when I was in the banking industry. And sometimes I would have a hard time making a choice or a decision. And he would say to me, okay, well, A sounds good or B sounds good. And I used to say to him, Jerry, tell me which one is better. He'd be like, I don't know. A sounds good, B sounds good. And then one day he said to me, Ginny, stop talking and close your eyes. What's in front of your face? And it was easy. I was like, A. And he's like, there you go. That's your best gut, right? And I did that same thing when she encouraged me to apply for that job. The last hour of the last day that I could have submitted my application, I closed my eyes and I said, I'll let the fates decide. And I submitted it. I took a chance, right? I took a risk. And then as I got through the interview process, I wanted it more and more and more, because I was like, oh, now I get it. I see it. I can see it. I can see it, right? Both with my eyes closed and my eyes wide open. And so those opportunities, if it hadn't worked out, then maybe it wouldn't have worked out. And, I try to hold for myself that personal, we said it earlier, so we're aligned, what'll be will be, right? So we thought we were 3 people today. Okay, well, now we're 2 people. So, okay, it is what it is. It'll be what it'll be, right? And that sort of easy approach to not overthink it, not worry about it, I think as women, that's another natural tendency. We're the caregivers, we're the making sure everything and everybody is okay. And that sometimes makes it harder to make a decision or to take a risk. And what is the true worst case that can happen? What really is the worst thing that can happen? And usually how do you move? And it's really generally not as bad as you may lead yourself to think.
I'm still going to answer the first question that you had said about what's not confident.
Yes.
I don't know if anyone works with kids. I decided to coach my son's 8-year-old soccer team last year for the first time. I've not done any coaching. I did play soccer in high school. It's a long time ago. Anyways, I can tell you what not confident is. If you don't come prepared as a coach to a team of young individuals, they will walk all over you. They will not be listening. They'll be kicking balls places. It will be chaos. And you could say fake it till you make it, but the idea is come in with a presence. And even if you don't know everything, you might make a mistake and have to laugh at yourself. You can't let them be kicking balls all over the place and run around on you. You have to assert yourself and be that confident person. So that to me, like not being prepared with a child soccer team, that's my vision of not confident.
So let's talk a little bit about strategies, perhaps examples of what we can do to feel more confident or gain confidence. I know, Ginny, when we talked in the past, you had talked about building up competencies and managing fears.
Mm-hmm.
How are some of the ways you do that?
Yeah, well, I think one is that I'm a perpetual study of situations and people's responses. And I, not just in my workplace, not just in my personal life, but I know my husband will say to me, how did you even get on that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm just curious about it. I'm curious and I want to know what made somebody tick. What was that response, right? I also think that because of my career and what I have seen, half of my career in IT and finance, very male dominated I can't talk today, fields. My first job out of college, I was sent home and told to change because I didn't wear professional enough clothes for women in that company. And this is 1988, not 1950, 1988, right? So I think the culmination of my career and my life experience has really, for me, taught me that fear is my worst enemy, right? And I try, I have a daughter who I wish I could say she's fearless, but she's not. I try really hard with my granddaughters to make sure they are encouraged to be fearless and try new things. And because I do think for women, that's our greatest challenge. And risk taking still, for when we become adults, there's still some social constructs around that, norms of what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. There's cultural nuances. There's what is our family going to think is appropriate, not appropriate. I made a big personal decision after my first marriage to get divorced. I was the first one in my family to get divorced. My mother was horrified. And the things she was horrified were not that I had ditched my husband. She was happy about that. But it was things like I was reinventing the model of motherhood. I wasn't home every night to cook dinner. There was one time my kid didn't go to school went to school without his lunch. And I said to my mom, I don't care. He won't starve. And she was like horrified, right? But that pressure that to me was a little bit of a pushing a norm in my environment that later on, I was like, I can do this. But again, it's the constant battle of the people around you. What are they telling you need to be? How do you interpret that in your mind with what you do, and then move forward anyway, authentically, right? Because each of us has to be who we are. And that path is very different. And if we can walk our own path, that to me is, if you boil it all up, that's what confidence is. You walk your path, you walk your journey.
That word authentic has come up through the conference several times today. And so let me bring up another issue, imposter syndrome. Something that is talked about often, something that I think has come to the forefront in the last several years of relative, especially to women. I don't think it's exclusive to women, but I think as women, we're more sensitive or susceptible to it. What are some of the things that we can do or we can suggest to our colleagues in the audience here and other women to, I don't want to say get over, but combat imposter syndrome. And I know that, preparedness, Casey, is something that you know a lot about with your background in the military. How do you handle that?
So I would just say there's always something you can research about whatever you're doing. There's always ways you can be prepared and be more ready for whatever you're going to encounter. So when I'm facing a situation where I'm not feeling super confident about it, I'm going to research the heck out of the subject, read everything I can within the time allowed, research the people, and know what I want to say, and then I'm going to rehearse it. I'm going to rehearse. On the way down here, I'm in the car driving, I'm rehearsing what I'm saying. I mean, there's no substitute for being prepared to project your confidence. I can tell you that I had 20 plus years in the Army, and I never had to interview for a job. So you really slotted your next job. So when I transitioned to the civilian world, there I was interviewing for jobs for the first time, having my virtual interviews, filling out my resume, and it was pretty scary. My experiences didn't directly translate to, even in the security world, a lot of things. So I had to think, how am I going to go in there and show to them that I'm the best person for the job? And that's what it was. Preparation. And then one little kind of side note, which I think is personal to each of us, is what makes you feel confident and powerful in your own right. Maybe it's a little prayer. For me, I used to be a really great runner. So even though I have arthritis knees and I'm not so fast anymore, I go on a little run. It's like 20 minutes, whatever it is. I go run the morning of the interview, the morning of the speech, whatever it is. And I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this. I know that I can. I feel my power. And that's how I walk into the next situation.
Yeah. One thing that is kind of funny is my 23-year-old son recently was going through something in his newly burgeoning career, and he's talking. And then he says, you know what, Mom, that's just imposter syndrome in my brain, and it's creating anxiety, and I'm going to dismiss it, and it's all good. And I was like, what did you just say? Right. So I do think that one of the good, it sort of to me was like, oh, this is hope, right? With all of the attention around mental health and mental wellness. And, I guess they're naming it now, which is good. So him being able to say to himself, this is just my imposter syndrome getting at me. I'm going to shut it off and just get back to it. I was actually, I thought, goodness, I hope they're telling girls this too and not just boys. But, that's a good way to really manage it, is you can catch your own thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to add one other thing.
Yeah.
This is something we talked about a little bit on the preparation call, but that is also being around really strong, confident women. This summer, I joined with a bunch of my West Point sisters, West Point women. We have a very strong network. There's a small amount of us, but we're strong together. And we went on and did a bike ride together, which was a physical activity, over 7 days. And I wasn't expecting it to make me come back to work and feel very empowered. But that's what it did, because there was a CEO on the team. There was another woman who's in marketing. She's a VP. There was another one just exiting the Army. There was retirees. They all had these different experiences. And just the time of sharing it together I was like, man, they can all do it. I can do it too. It really, really, really inspired me and boosted my confidence, seeing them do it and hearing their experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
So one of the things that I personally have found is that being around confident women and men is really helpful. We talked about being our authentic selves. And I find that, being who I am has been, I feel like I'm the same person I am today that I was when I started in my career. But I didn't have the ability to express it openly as much as I can now. And why is that? Maybe because I'm more confident, but I also feel like I've had the experiences and I've worked at it. I do prepare for whatever it is that I'm working on. So that's my confidence, knowing that I've prepared. I can answer questions, whatever it is that I need to do for my clients, I'm prepared to do that. But that comes with hard work. It comes with experience. I also feel like I'm more comfortable now admitting when I don't know something, which wasn't the case early on in my career. I really felt that if I said I didn't know something or I appeared to not know, I would be criticized or people would think less of me because, the guy knew or I didn't. And that's not the case anymore. I feel like today we have the ability as women in our workplace to say, I don't know that right now, but I'll get back to you, or I'll find someone who does and get the answer. And so I think we have more flexibility in developing our confidence. But, back to the authenticity thing, I really love that everyone now has the ability to say, I want to be my authentic self and really bring that. But I'm just, my experience is that there are degrees of it, right? Mm-hmm. You can be yourself, but you're not going to be the same self you are after you've had some experience, some work that you've done, and some ability to then, have earned the ability to maybe say some of the things that you wouldn't have said in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are still, we see it in the work we do in Girl Scouting. There's still gender dynamics too in mixed gender environments. The example I'll give you is there's a program called Venture Scouts, which I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that, but it is actually a cooperative program between Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts for the high adventure kids, the ones who literally want to go in the mountains of Colorado with a backpack and Survivor and that kind of thing. And one of my employees is a Venture Scout leader. And what he says, he has told me this story, that when they go, it is the most stressful weekend of his entire year. And it is because they do all of this preparation, that's all fine. It's little bits here, little bits there. But over the course of that weekend, almost inevitably, one of the boys will become Superman. He can leap tall buildings. He's puffing his feathers because he's realized there are girls around. And at the same time, one of the girls who knows how to climb the rocks will suddenly not be able to do it. She adopts what he calls the Penelope pit stop because she wants, and those are socialized messages and he'll say to me, that's not what we teach. It's not the way we teach it, but inevitably it will happen. And that's a still very ingrained social message where, men are supposed to take care of women. They're the strong ones. We support and nurture and caregive. And it is almost like in the air and in the water that we breathe. And so it's something for all of us as parents to be mindful of, if we're doing that or we see it, how do we foster that change in our kids so that, boys think they can grow up to cook dinner and do laundry and girls think they can be the CEO, right? And how do we make that happen? Because it's just really part of culture. I'm curious. Question. I'm just curious of how you saw that in other cultures in your tours overseas. Like, did you see that play itself out?
I did. It was very interesting, especially being deployed to Iraq. And I was saving one of these stories for the end, but I had a unique experience being partnered with an Iraqi police chief in my time, and he and I learned a lot from each other. His wife actually, under the previous regime, was a doctor. So he did value women very highly, but couldn't show that he valued women. Now, in public, I played like almost the assistant to him, but he also did everything I asked him to do, which is a hard thing to get anyone in the Iraqi police or Iraqi army to do. And it was very good for my leadership because they were like, I can count on the Iraqi police to be there, right? Yes, they'll be there. So General Latif and I, he, in his parting words to me when I left my 13 plus month tour there he's like, it's such a shame. He's like, we only use half of our population. He's like, just wonder where we'd be if we used all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I know we don't have a lot of time left, but so we've talked about a couple of different things today. We've talked about managing fears. We've talked about adapting to situations. We've talked about managing risks or being comfortable with the risks that you want to take or decide you're willing to take. We've talked about surrounding ourselves with strong, powerful examples of women who inspire us and show confidence. I think these are all takeaways that we can use in our everyday. But I just wanted to see if there are any closing comments or some words of wisdom you want to leave with us as we finish up our...
Yeah, well, I think to add, the only thing that I would add to that list, Trish, is the importance of asking for help and support, right? And they are different, right? So to me, that supportive community helps buoy you around, and over all the humps and helps build your confidence. And then sometimes truly you need help. And, that's a harder thing, especially when we're talking in the workplace, because we get concerned that it could be seen as a sign of weakness, or, it dings your self-confidence. Like, I can't believe I have to ask for help here because I should know this, or I should know where to go, or I should know what to do, especially when you're in a role for a long time, I've been a nonprofit CEO now in that role for 23 years in 2 different organizations, but I still need help sometimes. I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the solutions, right? And knowing that it's okay to be a little vulnerable and say, not only do I just not know, but I really don't even know where to start, that really... that experience then boosts your self-confidence too, I think. And
just a question, when you say support and help, I don't want to put words in, but you're defining as having maybe a coach or a mentor or someone, as opposed to literally asking for help when you need it.
Yep. To me, they are different.
Okay. So the few things I'll offer as parting words is, don't discount your presence and who you may be impacting. So I talked about the soccer team, which was a little bit of an adventure for me. So out of 10 kids, there's three girls on the team. And I did realize that I was making a pretty positive impact for them, just to have a female coach out there doing the stuff with them. I mean, some of them, no hesitation at all, but some of them, very skilled, hesitate. They're just not confident enough to charge in there like some of the boys. So I liked being there for them. I thought of a better example of the presence in Iraq, and that was one time on patrol. We were on a dismounted patrol, a major operation, and a woman waved me over, and of course my team had to come with me because you can't go into anybody's house alone. So myself and these 2 soldiers were with me, and she says to me in a little bit of broken English, she said, "I just wanted you to come in here. I want my daughters to see you." Mm-hmm. It's take your helmet off and see that there's a female leader, in charge of all these guys out here's 100+ men, and that was something she wanted to pass on. And I was just doing my job, but you never know. Don't discount your presence out there in the world and what impact you're leaving. She didn't have to say that to me or explain what was happening, and who knows how many times it happened I didn't get that feedback. So go out there, do your best, and be present.
That's awesome.
So I'm going to open it up to questions in just a moment. But a question I have for you, Casey, is how did you decide you wanted to get into the military?
There's a lot of different reasons people get into the military. I was really looking for an opportunity to have my school paid for. West Point was a unique opportunity. My guidance counselor in high school, which many people can't say that, he was like, "You need to go talk to these people." And I did. Things kind of fell into place the way they were supposed to. And I went there thinking I wouldn't get my college paid for. But West Point is not a place that you stay out of money. No way. You have to really want it. So when I was there, I was thinking, wow, this is something where I really feel like I can do something truly worthwhile and use all of my talents. And they pay me to work out in the morning.
And build your confidence.
And build my
impressive.
Yeah.
I'm going to open it up. Does anyone have questions or...
Yeah, in the back. Oh, there was one back. First was back there.
Hi, just want to first thank you all for your time and all the great helpful advice that you've given us in this talk. So looking at 3 very confident women, and I'm just curious, how do you balance the appearance maybe of arrogance sometimes, or how do you identify if maybe you're potentially crossing over and being overconfident?
So, how do I balance the appearance? One thing that I learned from another female nonprofit CEO was the importance of asking questions versus making statements. Because I'm also very mindful of my position power or what it can construe in certain circumstances. So I try to ask questions and not make statements. That being said, I also think it's important to have somebody who can keep you humble, right? Who can remind you that, yeah, and all that. Like, okay, so that when you start to get convinced of your self-importance, they kind of bring you down to ground level. So I'm really blessed in my current job. I have the director of my office who will say things like, yeah, really, you talked way too much in that meeting. Or, I will say, what do you think? And she'll say, yeah, you don't want to do that. And I've empowered her to be a truth teller for me. And then, the second one is my husband, who is super proud of what I do and what I've accomplished, but also is like, chicken or shrimp, like, come on, make dinner, so it kind of grounds you back to, to that. So I think it's important that you have those around you. And I would argue we probably all do. I think we worry as women more about, because, especially those of us that are more senior in our careers, we've probably been accused of being too bossy or too aggressive, that something has hit us that where we are concerned about that. And we maybe are more concerned about it sometimes than we need to be.
Very good.
Do you want to go ahead?
I can answer too, but I feel like that was a great answer. Somebody keeping you humble, I think, is imperative in any position you're in when you're in power. Someone to tell you the truth. And often your spouse does that, but they don't get to see everything you do at work. So there has to be a work buddy that does it as well.
Yeah.
I go back to my statement at the beginning. Can I empower someone with this knowledge? Will this knowledge embarrass anyone? Is it an emergency? So thinking of how you can approach it that way, you won't come across as overconfident. If it's an emergency, you got to say it. If you can empower someone and do it offline, even better. But if you choose not to embarrass anyone, you're going to be fine. Then what you're saying is right on point. Right place, right time, right subject.
I think for me, the idea of being arrogant is just, it's probably just not in my personality. I don't think I'm someone who ever, even when something really great is accomplished, I'm the first person to say, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that. So I find that the few times where I am really so confident that I want to say something that could come across as arrogant, I take a breath. I really do. I stop myself. I kind of count to 3. I take a deep breath, and then I go back to, my usual demeanor, which is, I think, similar to what Casey's saying. I never want to say anything to embarrass anyone or point out how wrong, even though I know they're so damn wrong. But at the same time, make it a situation where they can see that they can learn from what I'm saying, and I'm not trying to make them feel bad about what was wrong. So, but I think it's a great question, especially nowadays where women are more empowered. And I hate the fact that we have to sit here and, talk about it, because if men come across as, they're powerful and even arrogant in some ways, it's not seen as a negative. You don't walk away and say, oh, what a bitch.
Yeah.
That's the difference, right? Yeah. And so we're constantly under the struggle.
Well, we say not nice things sometimes. We do.
Being, right? We have to walk that fine line, and it is difficult. But again, for me, it's a situation where I just stop and I take a breath and I try to make sure that I'm saying something from a place of knowledge and trying to be helpful and not trying to do something negative.
Yeah, and I think as long as I'm thinking of a experience I had in my last nonprofit job, which was in the state of Delaware, and when I would do certain things in the northern half of the state, I could be strong assertive Ginny. And then when I went to the southern part of Delaware, it was much more genteel, and I didn't wear power suits. I wore cardigan sweaters, but I knew what I was doing. So to me, it was clever. It wasn't about seeming, I was adapting to the environment so that I didn't come across in that environment as arrogant or out of place. So I think sometimes it can be situational too.
Sure. Any other questions? I saw a couple of hands in the front here.
Do you feel as though, as you stated earlier, you deal with 7-year-olds who can come off confident? Do you feel as though you're born with it, or is it something that everyone has in them? I have a 7-year-old, and her confidence, is it something that you can grow with, or do you just feel like sometimes people just have it in them?
Yeah. So I'm learning a lot about all the science and research of leadership, and because I'm a professor now. There is actually research that does show that some of it is an innate skill and trait, but at the same time, the other side of that equation, it is totally developable. So it is a little bit of nurture and nature. So that's where you see the differences, right? You can those who are born with a little more of the innate will likely weather circumstance, whereas if you nurture it, it can grow too.
You don't want to mistake a person who's an introvert for being having a lack of confidence, and I think that happens a lot when somebody's an introvert. And just knowledge is power, right? So if they know that they know it, that they're going to sound, better than the person who doesn't know it. That introversy, I think, is really impactful on that mistake of being confident.
Yep, absolutely.
Hi there. My name is Wendy Moynihan. I have Wendy Moynihan Photography. So I work a lot with personal branding and building confidence and taking really confident portraits of women to share in their business, to grow their business. So it's very exciting to hear what you're saying about confidence, because it takes a while, even in a photography situation, where you can get somebody to show up and be confident and show the inner self that you want. And at 55, I wish I had known a little bit more of this when I was in corporate America. Right now, I have I've hired a coach, a personal coach, but in the day, I wish I had a mentor. What is your thought about mentorship and the importance of a formal mentorship program? I feel like that's what I could have used when I was
Well, I mean, I have certainly benefited from it. I could tell dozens of stories reflecting back, some that were formal and acknowledged, and then others where I had learned from people and were leveraging relationships in jobs that I had to learn things. So I do think it's really, really important. Formalized programs work as long as both the mentor and the mentee have a shared objective, right? And I have, I'm thinking in particular of one career mentor I have who, she and I have a nice personal relationship, but we're not like girlfriends. We're not going to go to, take a trip to Vegas or do anything like that. But she pays attention to what is happening with my career. And, when she calls and says it's time to go to dinner, I'm like, uh-oh, what happened? Like, what is she going to say? But she's been a source of inspiration for me. And that's all that both of us want, right? Now, if I wanted to get closer then it wouldn't kind of work. So I think it can help. And in today's world, there's so many opportunities, both in the physical world and the virtual world, to connect with mentors. Lots of programs for women, networks of women, Forum of Executive Women, Chief. I could rattle off probably half a dozen more, where you just have to kind of find the right community and then take advantage of that community.
I didn't have any official mentors, if you will, but what I found were individuals who were willing to support me through my career and would give advice. And for lack of having formal mentors, the other thing that I did was actually pick in my own mind people that I admired, and I would try to mimic their behavior, like generally mimic, not word for word, but noticing how they presented themselves in meetings, noticing how they interacted with other professionals. There was, you know, a high level of respect that they garnered. And I always thought, you know, these are the folks that I want to aspire to be like. So I love now that, you know, 30 years later, we have mentors. People have asked me to be their mentor, and I'm always so humbled by it, because I think to myself, gosh, I have information and experience I can share now. I wish that had been the case now. So if it's an official mentorship program, if you just ask someone, people love to be able to help other people and give advice. I mean, really, who doesn't want to be asked what you think? So I highly suggest that whether it's official, you know, formal capacity or informal, that you pursue it. And Casey, I'm sure you have.
I did have several mentors, and I think there's different mentors, different types of mentors in your life, and doing different things. Being at West Point, we were very fortunate to get set up with an officer or family that might mentor you. Who I was set up with didn't end up being my mentor. I met a male and a female officer that were married and through my church, and that ended up being like a lifelong mentor. Tara's the female officer ended up getting out of the Army, but she's been my lifetime mentor in the spiritual sense, and also just because whenever I struggled, imposter syndrome, whatever it was, I could call her, but she reminded me who I was at my core. She knew me. She might not know anything about security or anything about the corporate world, but she knew me, and that was very important. Now, I'll tell you that when I was a young lieutenant, I had a female first sergeant who was just kicking butt all over the place. She didn't take no for an answer. She was just so powerful, and she was such an example to me. And she didn't want to mentor me because she didn't want to mentor an officer, senior enlisted. But I kept at it, and she did mentor me. She loves me nowadays. We were great, but that was so. Sometimes you find the right mix, and you gravitate towards someone who has something you need. And when I came to New Jersey, really only a little over a year ago, I ended up in a meeting, and I ran into someone. Her name's Jackie Larea. She's a couple sessions over, and she sort of adopted me. So I wasn't even looking for her, but she came to me and she's like, oh, you have all these great experiences. I'm going to connect you to the right people. And like I said, your eyes are open. Somebody's going to come and help you along the way.
Yeah, that's mentorship and sponsorship, which sponsorship is really important too. And that's something as women that we don't leverage nearly enough. So if you were here this morning when Natasha Hemmings and I were on stage, Natasha called me her mentor, but I think we have mentored each other. But I was Natasha's sponsor because she wanted to be a nonprofit CEO, and doors were not opening for her. And I made sure I opened the doors. She didn't need me to mentor her to walk through. She was more than ready to walk through, but she couldn't get the doors opened. And that's one of, when I think about some of the things I'm most proud about, again, pride is not arrogance, so be proud of things. There are 4 African American women running nonprofits in this country who I opened the door, because the doors are often not open to our sisters of color, and they are judged differently for lots of reasons. It is a whole nother workshop, but paying it forward then helps. It's I'm proud about that. Now I'm confident because I'm like, look what I did. I did that for those 4 women, and look the effect that's having in their communities where they are working and the impact they are able to have. So that's another way, something that we can all do for each other is, open the door.
So I think
I'm super proud about that. Isn't Tasha still here? I know she was here, but she left. Yeah.
So I think we heard that having multiple mentors is a good idea as well, because you may need different mentors for different points in your life or different choices you're making or career choices, and different people offer different things. And we've learned the difference between a sponsor and a mentor, which sponsors are folks who are willing to do something for you. They are going to go and ask that something, whether it's open a door, make a phone call, ask someone to consider them for a position, do the direct networking that leads to a position. ask that they get a contract, etc. So certainly a difference between those two things. I know we only have about 3 minutes left. I have a question for the woman who is the photographer. How do you get women, you're saying that you're taking their photographs, how do you get them to be confident? What techniques do you use?
I was going to say, that's
to
work in progress for me.
I watch my young daughters, my teenage daughters, and they're happy to take their photos and post them everywhere, and they look amazing. But that's not something that I grew up with, and it's something that I'm curious, like, how do you coax out of these women their confidence to take their portrait or their photographs?
Sometimes it takes a long time because we start with a questionnaire and what are their goals? So what is your goal? Do you want your customers to see you as friendly, as confident, as approachable? For example, I have a story. I had a CEO saying I'm really a big deal at work. People don't like to talk to me. They don't like to approach me. I want photos. I want personal branding photos so people feel like they can approach me and talk to me. And I want to feel to look on the outside as how good I feel on the inside. And I want that to show to my colleagues, to my customers.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, we are out of time, getting flagged back there. I want to thank my panelists here today. You've done an amazing job. I hope everyone learned a lot. And please enjoy the rest of the conference. It's been great so far today.